The Bears lose the opener and start the season immediately on the wrong foot. Nick Whalen and I talk through the ups, the downs, and everything to do with a rough Packers opener on this episode of Bear With Us. What's going on, everybody? I am Robert Schmitz, the editor of the Bears blog, here with Nick Whalen of Football Guys, two Bears fans that just watched the Bears get shellacked, and here we are to talk about it. Now, Nick, oh gosh, what a rough one. How are you feeling after the game?
I mean, honestly, I was like third quarter when it was happening, it just felt like I was in a nightmare. And by the end, I'm like, okay, like it is what it is. There's something that's gonna give me a little bit of calm here. And maybe I'll start that off with the pod, but this is what settles me down. Okay. We know what happened last year for the Bears in week one, right?
Yes.
We won a game we shouldn't have won. But did you look across like the landscape of the NFL in week one? Like it was really messy.
Yes.
Um, the Eagles won by 5 against New England, which everyone thought that was going to be a joke of a game. The Browns almost shut out Cincinnati 24-3. I mean, Cincinnati, AFC champ or
Right.
AFC loser at the championship game last year. Tampa went to Minnesota and won with Baker, who the Bears will face next week.
Yep.
Washington barely beat Arizona with Josh Dobbs. The Raiders went to Denver and beat Sean Payton, which that was an upset. The Rams shellacked Seattle at Seattle, which I think was like the biggest shock probably of today.
Yep.
And then Detroit won. When we saw that one on Thursday night, which probably like has, worn off a little bit because new football's happened. But like when the season just starts, a lot of things can happen. And I think that's part of what the third quarter early part of the fourth quarter was just like, it was like weirdness because the rest of the game was pretty steady and we could talk through a lot of that. But then it was just like a wave of Green Bay points and bad plays by the Bears, and the Bears lost.
Well, yeah, bad got worse really fast in this game. And I'm excited that we get to break this down, if only because there, I think, are some serious coaching parts that we can talk about. And can I be honest, Nick? I kind of hate talking about coaching. I have lived an entire life of being a football fan, watching great, wonderful fans wrap bad player performance under this mysterious umbrella of coaching. Why did we lose? Well, it wasn't because that player is not very good. It wasn't because Jamarcus Webb can't block. It was because of the coaching. What would the
Mhm.
coaching have fixed? I don't know. But Bill Belichick always gets his team playing, and it,
Yep.
it can't be because their players are just better. Surely it wouldn't be, right?
Mhm.
And so I really don't like talking about coaching because while we could talk about scheme, there's an element of attention to detail that we're just not going to really know because
Yep.
we're not in the room with them. But
Mhm.
man, oh man, what a bummer of a game. On one hand, you had a defense that knew it couldn't rush the passer. And if they didn't know they couldn't rush the passer, what did they think they had on the defensive line? Right. But instead, on different third downs, they weren't going to send any blitz help. They weren't going to run any simulated pressures. They weren't going to do anything that they didn't normally do. Instead, they were going to do what they normally do: rotate out of two high into either one high or two high, play standard zone cover two, maybe cover three, maybe Tampa two. And shockingly enough, Jordan Love, despite clearly looking rattled throughout the entire first half, sat back with a great pocket and found open receivers on massive third downs.
Mhm.
Massive third downs, Nick. We're talking a 3rd and 13 early, big 3rd and 4 that turned into 3rd and 9 that the Packers breezed past. All kinds of key plays that you and I said that the Bears should have had the advantage. They should have, but the
Yep.
coverage net can only hold for so long. And I can't help but look at Allen Williams and say, what more do you want than Tremaine Edmonds and Jalen Johnson and a better Kyler Gordon and TJ Edwards, who we spent money on, and Eddie Jackson's back there with a second round pick, Jaquan Brisker? Like, do you think you need 11 All Pros to run this defense? And if you do, should we change it? Should we think about doing something else? I'm I'm pulling my hair out because this is the same defense that you and I would have excused last year as, well, I mean, do they really want to win? And now here we are this year. They were trying with the same plan. Why did they think things would be any different?
Mhm. Yeah, so, it was it's almost like because they didn't blitz much at all from what I saw. I mean, they had a few twists on. I mean, they didn't even we talked about the creeper blitzes or zone blitzes. Like, I didn't see much of that at all. I saw
Anything.
way more of that from Green Bay. And so it's almost like teams that have a really good pass rush, they're like, well, we'll just get to the quarterback, and then our guys, it won't matter how bad they can cover because their pass rush will get to them. It's like the
Yes.
Bears are flipping that. They're like, well, we can like shut them down to the back end, and then the pass rush will get there, but we're not good enough for that. And the pass rush really didn't get there. Basically, the one sack we had was because Love held on it too long, and I think we just like lucked into a sack. Like there wasn't
You'll get one
much
eventually.
pressure at all. And the only one I can think of that I remember was there was one Billings had up the middle that forced an incompletion, a dig I think over the middle to Love. There was another one where Yannick off the edge was just at least close to him, put a hand up, and that caused an incompletion. But with no pressure, I mean, even a no weapons, new quarterback Love, you're gonna have time. You can complete passes.
Yep, absolutely. Turns out, Nick, football's a team game. And when your offensive line can give you all day in the pocket, you'll figure it out eventually. And I don't want to sit here and pretend to you that the Bears defenders looked phenomenal or something. I mean, for instance, Eddie Jackson gave up inside leverage on a play where, based on one look at it, I may take a look at the all 22 and change my mind, but it looks like Romeo Dobbs broke across his face, and I
Mhm.
cannot believe that a safety of Jackson's caliber allowed that to happen. Huge bummer. Like, those 7 points stood as the leading points until, gosh, I mean, technically, I guess you could say the entire game, but until the Bears scored that second touchdown. But it was, I understand that we talked about this in the pregame pod, that the Packers' offensive line was better than the Bears' defensive line, but boy, oh boy, did they take their wins in stripes, you know? Like,
Mhm.
they took something that should be, okay, it's an NFL on NFL matchup, but the Packers are better, so at least the Bears will get theirs, to, oh man, they completely outclassed Chicago's defensive line, and I felt like Alan Williams allowed them outclassing the Bears' defensive line to become the defining point of the game, and that makes me frustrated because it didn't have to be that way. You could have tried various blitzes, cover with 6, cover with 5, depending on how many guys you're sending and how you're sending them. Instead, we rushed with 4. We didn't get there. Love converted multiple first downs, and I'm left wondering what I'm supposed to be excited about on the defensive side of the ball because it's unequivocally more talented, but we just gave up more to the Packers this year than we gave up to the Packers last year when they're worse. So help me, Nick. What am I supposed to sit here and say? No, this is the good part.
I would say it's week 1, and there's not a ton of reps in a game, and that's part of it for me. I mean, I think there's play calls, like, for instance, I got bothered well, let me break this down at least numbers wise, and then I'll break down a call that bothers me. So, the Packers had 29 plays in the first half for 95 yards, which is, I think it was like 3.6 yards per play. Maybe it was like 3.3, somewhere in there. And then they had 3 plays in the second half, which I'm sure we'll talk about, for 123 yards, and the other 29 plays were for 90 yards. So, 3 huge plays and basically a pick 6, and that was the game right
Yep.
there. And I'm not one of those, I'm not taking away, but
Sure.
still like the whole like, bend, don't break, we'll sit back in our coverage and let it, we'll hold them to whatever it wasn't working. I mean, you talked about the third down, the 3rd and 13, um, really soft coverage, which I understand on 3rd and 13, but you still need to rally and tackle. I think it was Romeo Dobbs or Jaden Reed before they get the first down in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, he motions inside, and Jalen Johnson trails a post, which you would let go to the safety, and then they completed it out on the outside for another first down on one that we needed. And I think the biggest backbreaker of the entire game was the 4th and 3 Texas route, which is a Texas route is basically an angle.
Yep.
You wanna think of like a 90-degree angle. I know people can't see what I'm talking about, but like and you fake outside, so you fake almost like a flat route and then cut back inside to TJ Edwards. They were in cover 1. Yeah, cover 1, which we don't run. Were you trying to spy Love? I mean, we'll find out the all 22, but like that almost seems like something that we don't do. And then let's do it on one of the most critical downs, and they convert for a touchdown. Um, it was just it was weird because I don't know that Green Bay um outplayed us. I think Green Bay hit their shots, and I feel like we fumbled a lot of the game away.
Well, I would agree with you, I think, but that what a great segue, by the way, that I can now just bring it to talk about the offense. Because defensively speaking, I tend to agree. They hit their uppercuts, basically stunned the Bears and laid them out on the mat using very few plays. That said, I don't want to mute the effectiveness of those plays. You gave up
Mhm,
31 points. It wasn't a good day. And
mhm,
worse, Nick, it was one of those games that ended so early that we don't even get a true measure of how many points the Packers actually would have scored,
mhm.
because you hit a state of the game where you're not really trying to score anymore. You pull Sean Clifford well before or like you pull Jordan Love well before the game is over. I hate these, right?
Yeah,
Because these remind me of games that the Bears played in 2020, where we would talk about how good the defense was, and it was like, well, the offense scored 6 points. So once the other team realized that they had 20 and they were like, we're good, they just shifted to
yeah.
their ball control plan, and it
Mhm.
makes the defense's efficiency numbers look a little better, but because the offense isn't playing competitive football. And
You know what? Along those lines, what scared me, Robert, was, and I'm sure we'll talk about all this in detail, but when Green Bay scored the first touchdown, immediately nightmares of Bears offenses went through my mind. I was like, I hope we score at least 7 points this game, and then it was only six at the half. I was like,
yep,
if we don't score at least seven
yes,
points, so I mean, probably along those lines, right? Think of like past Bears teams and not
yes.
be able to score.
And I want to start talking about the offense by saying I think a sane person has to look at the situation and understand that we are in the darkest timeline here. And that's okay, right? The Bears have planned around the darkest timeline. In case the Bears are really terrible, Nick, they'll end up with not one, but probably two first round picks that are really, really high in this next year. There is a
Mhm.
way out of this. But man, oh man, what breaks my heart, Nick, is that in that first quarter, I felt like Justin Fields was humming, not the Bears offense. The Bears offense, as throughputed through the quarterback, was doing great. The Bears rushing offense looked really terrible. I mean, the Bears got better rushing performance between the tackles last year out of Larry Borum, Alex Leatherwood. I think Cody was still playing, but I'm not 100% sure. And Tevin Jenkins. Nate Davis did not help. Darnell Wright was not a positive as far as like the Bears rushing attack went. Lucas Patrick, unfortunately, looked like the Lucas Patrick we saw and not the Lucas Patrick we dreamed of. And all of these in vacuums are okay. But man, Nick, it felt like the Bears just kept running the ball despite losing up front. And suddenly you took this offense that Fields was finding a way to get yardage down the field. And look, Nick, I consider myself a pretty honest fan, right? I want to be able to call a spade a spade. And I look at this offensive game plan, and what do I see? Well, Fields was 2 for 2 in the first drive for 22 yards. The Bears got to a 3rd and 1. They QB snuck it with a play that worked last year. The interior line didn't get any push, so on 4th and 1, they did the aggressive thing. They went for it again. They still didn't get it. Is that the quarterback's fault? Not really. Is that even bad play calling? Well, usually your interior should get you the yards, right? So they turn it over. Bears
Uh,
score. Or
can,
yeah,
can I?
go
So
ahead.
what I talked about on the last pod that we did, or if you're watching this YouTube, was I wonder if Chicago is going to do the Eagles quarterback sneak play. You have Fields, strong runner, athletic, has the size, he can do it. And they didn't do it
They didn't
because
do it.
if you watch the QB sneak that the Packers did, they motioned Luke Musgrave right behind Love and he pushed him forward. The first one was Komet, which I understand. I mean, Casey did that a little bit. You do that when the defense isn't all. You do it when the quarterback's in the gun and the defense is all spread out, and then they motioned all down. Then you audible out of that. You don't run that play, or you run the toss to Fields, which we saw last year.
Right.
Then on 4th down, Fields sneaks it, which I get, but push him. And Herbert did tried late, but not really. Like get right behind him. You know what you're doing. Or idea, wild. Hard count the crap out of him.
Right. Oh, all these are better ideas, but I've covered so many Bears teams where the play calling has been so bad that I'm just sitting here trying to eliminate variables. And even against a stacked box, you're hoping you can squeeze that yard out. I'm with you in spirit. Just know that like there are better things we could do here. But of course there are better things that we can do here, and unfortunately, that's one of the better called drives of the day. Because then, as we continue, we end up with a drive that doesn't go the way that we wanted it to, but that's fine, honestly, because the Bears march their way down the field behind a Justin Fields that continues to encounter these second and long scenarios. One turns into a third and long that he magicians his way out of with a sweet spin. I don't know. I don't want to see that Chase Claypool was running open at that point as he turned around, but hey, he gets first down anyways. Who cares? Like, we're thumbs up. Then we get down into the red zone. We call a bootleg we've been calling since 2022. We get sacked on it. Bummer. Cole Kmet doesn't win a one-on-one, but also maybe there was a little bit of defensive holding. Never easy to tell when they're scrapping in the end zone. Oh, well, we get 3. Could be worse, right, Nick?
Right.
And then from there, I swear, every single drive for the rest of the half opened up with a screen or an inside run. And the Bears lost yards, and I'm not kidding, nearly all of them. And so from there, every drive opened up at 2nd and 10, 2nd and 12, 2nd and 17 at one point. And there's just not really much. Like, the quarterback can do things from there, but that's a very hostile environment for quarterback success. And I don't think anybody would say otherwise, right?
Well, no, I agree with you. And this was what we ran into last year. And it was weird because Chicago was penalized a ton this game, which there's something they were better at last year. So that's one thing that puts you behind the chains. But one person that I was just shocked had a bad game, in my opinion, is Khalil Herbert. I saw multiple runs where he decided he was going to go. This was, I think, either on the first drive, I think it was, or yeah, the first drive. He went outside of the kickout block and got no yards on the carry. If he goes inside, obviously he'll get at least 4 or 5 or more. And then later in the game, he tries to bounce it all the way outside of Rasul Douglas and gets tackled for 0 loss on first down. And it's like, be who you are. Later, he ran inside. Foreman ran inside. Roshan ran inside, and it went well. So I don't know. It depends on maybe the scheme and like doing what you're supposed to do. But on that drive you talked about, it was like 1st and 10 run action, which is different than play action. Run actions when you actually pull a lineman. Deep shot to Mooney, right? That was that 22, 23 yarder on the sideline, which Fields again improvised and found him open. But like passing a first down is okay. You can do it. Like
It's allowed.
yeah, sure. It's legal to do.
And that's the thing. Like, we only get one look at the broadcast angle, and maybe you get some replays. So if Herbert's missing run lanes, I didn't catch it at this point. So it would be really interesting to see. Maybe the play calls weren't the issue that it felt like they were. But at the same time, Nick, I don't think that there was a play call as abysmal, in my opinion, as, okay, second half, right? We've been running the ball on first down all game long, right? What are we going to do to open up first play of the second half? Well, obviously it's play action. And if it's play action, it's very likely a bootleg, or worst case, it'll just be a standard play action and we'll send our end in Fields' face. Yeah, they were right. I mean, Matt LaFleur and whoever, or Joe Barry, felt like they were living inside of Getsy's head, especially starting in that second half region. So you had those penalties that just killed the Bears offense in the first half. And from there, I mean, look, I didn't think that Luke Getsy's first couple drives looked all that bad. But starting around that second half, the Packers absolutely knew everything that Luke Getsy was going to do. And in my opinion, almost by default, when you're an offensive coordinator and you're getting read like that, like, you better have a strong game against Tampa Bay, because that is about as bad a signal as a fanalist as I would see. What do you think?
No, yeah, because I mean, at some point you want to change it up. I mean, I've even had this is actually funny. I'll admit this. Um, I was offensive coordinator before, and
Nice.
I would throw in I would yell numbers, and it was wristbanded to my quarterback. One time, I said a number, and I think he heard a different number, or I said the wrong number, or whatever, and a different play got called than I thought. And it turned out to be like a 62-yard reverse that we got down to the one. Like, okay, well, not what I really thought I was going to do. You got to change it up. I mean, there was like what one slant to Mooney. Where's
One.
the slants? Where's the option routes? Even like a quick, stick route or a spot route over the middle, something in rhythm real quick. That stuff wasn't there. It was like
Nope.
screens, everything was outside. And I understand that if the pass rush was there every single play, let's just do this so no one gets sacked. But you have to trust that Fields can take a three-step drop and just throw it to somebody. You have to. If you
Right.
can't trust that, or you can't trust that these weapons that we invested a lot of draft capital, money, trading down for aren't going to get open, then that's a whole nother bigger problem. So like let him take 3 5 step drops and let hopefully the lineman doesn't let just an Ole block through and he can get rid of
Hopefully.
the ball. Like you have to do that.
And speaking of the offensive line, Darnell Wright against Rashawn Gary was a matchup we highlighted in the negative on the pregame pod. Not surprised. That's going to
Yep.
happen. I mean, Darnell Wright is going to take his lumps. I'm sure the film isn't going to look pretty, but most rookie tackles are not going to just step in and win. It doesn't happen. And then if they do, they tend to regress later because you're going to take your lumps, whether you take them early or later. But man, Nick, what a bummer to see that the Bears offensive line looked worse. It felt worse than it did last year. And last year felt about as bad as it could. So you sit here and, like you're saying, it's either Getsy that isn't calling these three-step drop packages, or it's Fields that hasn't inspired confidence in these three-step drop packages, and we're not gonna know which one's which. I
Yep.
feel like Fields played a pretty solid game until he very clearly started pressing near the end of the game when he resorted to nearly every bad habit we've ever seen him we've ever seen from him, and the game started to spin out of control. But I don't know, Nick. I feel like okay, I'm not going to say that. I just can't go there yet. I just can't go there yet. But this is definitely a tough game to swallow. Like, Fields has so many tools, and I thought he took real steps forward in this one. And it's only one game. If the Bears end up still finding their way into the playoffs as some 8-9 wonder team that wins 6 of the last 9, or even weirder, goes the Detroit route and wins like 8 of their last 8 somehow, obviously people are going to be clamoring. Like, we have got to stick with exactly what we've got going on. But this felt like the wrong foot to start on for everybody. And it's one of those where, let me put it this way, Nick. You ever been in one of those group projects where like it went badly and it wasn't your fault? Like, it was definitely Sharon and Mike's fault, but like your name is still on the project and you still don't get a good grade. And
Mhm.
within that, that's kind of how I ended up feeling about Justin today. Like, there is a point. I like him, Nick. I really do. I love what he's got to offer. There's a point where you are what your record, what your numbers say you are. And Fields isn't there yet by any stretch of the imagination. But those high first round picks, like, they're going to be awfully tempting. And
Yep.
if this is as good as the resume gets, it's probably not. But if this is as good as the resume gets, it's not a very strong resume. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Mhm. No, I think. I mean, there were things that Fields did well. I mean, you were talking about Joe Barry or whomever on defense was in the bag. I mean, two different naked boots were sacks. It's like, man, you guessed right there because there was other ones I saw where that backside edge chased down the ball carrier on outside
Right.
zone and tackle him. And I'm like, man, you're just guessing right. Like maybe they're tipping that off. Maybe that's bad. But
Maybe.
like you count that out. I mean, there's multiple screens where Claypool, Komet twice missed blocks or like decided
Yep.
not to block. There's another one where I saw Wright tripped on
Oh yeah.
Claypool, and then Claypool decided to let go, so it wasn't a flag, and then it was like no gain. Like I mean, that's 6 plays of just
100%.
what the heck was that stuff?
Oh,
So I feel like that compounds, but I saw Fields change his arm angle. I mean, that slant to Moore
was sweet.
on time. I mean, really, there were some, I mean, passes late in the game where he was just checking it down. A couple were overthrown, but like
The touchdown to Mooney was great.
under
Like,
pressure.
it's I can't I hope it doesn't sound like I'm sitting here saying like I'm out on Justin Fields or something ridiculous like that. It's more that I guess I sit here, Nick, and this reminds me too much of those 2019, 2020 team seasons where everything went from we're going to build the best Bears team possible to every single person that has any power on this roster is going to now do what they can to throw somebody else under the bus to keep their job. And it's week one. It's week one that we're not there yet, but you lose to the Packers, and it's going to bring up every Bears fan's nightmare that they've
Mhm.
just about ever had, right? And so now all of a sudden, I mean, you tell me, like, what happens? What happens if Tampa Bay doesn't go well? Like, what happens if you don't surprise against Kansas City? What happens if then after we're not going there? Like, it's not, we don't need to be so prisoner of the moment. The NFL season is long, but
Yep.
man, it felt like in that last game, I think I was shocked, Nick, that a team that has invested so much in wide receiver, that we talked about how wide receiver is without a doubt one of the best units on the team, let
Mhm.
alone the best unit on the offense. And we threw so many passes that were called for Cole Kmet and fullbacks and running backs in terms of the screens we were running that it felt as if the wide receivers just weren't the focal point of the game plan. And I just don't know how that makes any sense.
Mhm. Well, I mean, if Fields' goal or the offense's new goal was we're not going to throw interceptions or turn the ball over, it was successful. I mean,
Yeah.
that one pass, maybe I'm wrong. I know people are going to be like, he just stared him down. I think he looked left and thought Walker was going to go left with it and it was going to open the window, and it didn't. But that's one. I mean, how many bad passes did he truly have today?
Maybe two when it mattered. I mean, I'm not somebody who really tries to count garbage time because if you're going to
Yeah.
count for somebody, you have to count it against somebody else. It's kind of like preseason football, right?
Mhm.
It's about that helpful, at least in my opinion. And early in the game, he had, I think it was 23 attempts. He, at that point, had like 144 yards. He had a pick and a touchdown. And I thought he had placed the ball really well. Yeah, a lot of those throws were checkdowns, but they were hitting guys in the hands. And even Deontay Foreman was turning up field and getting extra yards after the catch.
Yep.
Khalil Herbert was picking up yards after the catch. Like the ball was coming out of his hands well. It was coming out of his hands. I don't want to jump Nick and say like it was definitely on time. Like we don't know until we see the all 22, but we weren't taking sacks until
Right.
suddenly we started pressing, and especially after that interception. Gosh, Nick, I don't want to sound like some radio talking head. I don't feel necessarily like a radio talking head saying this, though. I was surprised at how surprised the Bears roster was that the game went so badly. Does that make
Yes.
sense? They got
No,
so.
that's exactly what it was. Because I mean, it was funny in the first half. I was almost going to tweet, "Wow, no sacks," and Fields avoided a few, and he
Stepped
did some
around
things.
some, ran for other
Right,
yardage.
right.
Like,
But I was like, "No sacks, like, nice." And then there was one, I'm like, "Okay, there's one at the half," you know? And then it was, we can't do anything in the
right.
second half. It's kind of where it got to, and that's the most troubling thing. It's like it wasn't just, I mean, because they scored, and then it was nothing, then they scored, basically, and it was just a snowball effect. And then you bounced back, and then Love fumbles it, Musgrave leaks out and they score. Like it was just okay. And then
How
it
many
was the pick
Bears?
six. Like, it was just none of the momentum went our way. But I just I struggle a lot with throwing Justin Fields under the bus. I know it's going to be super easy to
Oh, yeah.
do with this game, but I like we talked about, there was like 3 missed blocks by screens by receivers, which is that shouldn't happen. I mean, it wasn't like someone ran over Tyler Scott. They ran through Chase Claypool and Cole Kmet. Those guys are supposed to block. Um, so here's a question for you. What offensive lineman, and again, this is just from this take, we'll have all 22. Which offensive lineman do you think played poorly?
Oh man. Do I have to name all of them? Like it that's no, as in like do you have to name all the ones that played poorly? Because it's so funny. Like I don't remember the Bears having to deal with a lot of pressure from the left-hand side, so that would be Braxton Jones plus theoretically. But
Yep.
Braxton's two false starts and a holding penalty were
Yes.
bad. And they
Yep.
all really hurt the offense.
Yeah.
Darnell Wright played about as well as I would have expected from a rookie. Some people are going to see that as not good enough because he allowed the first sack that maybe undid a lot of good things. Nate Davis got whooped by Devontae Wyatt on a couple of big time reps. Maybe it was Kenny Clark. All 22 will certainly help with that. Like, I thought Lucas Patrick, I didn't see him, I don't know, creating displacement, but when it comes to the run plays, like I'm watching the ball. I'm not even going to pretend that I'm staring down the offensive line. I don't know. Like, it almost felt like it was an ensemble effort, is what I would tell you, where the pockets didn't feel, I don't know, crazy clean. And maybe guys were open downfield. It's hard to know because of the
Mhm.
way that they framed the broadcast footage. But more than anything, it started to feel like the offense didn't have its own idea of how it was going to score. But let's get back to the offensive line. Did you feel like any lineman in particular played poorly?
I thought one played really poorly. I mean, I'm with you on the Braxton Jones penalties, but we didn't. I didn't see at least Braxton Jones get bench pressed back into fields like we saw last year with
Right.
issues with the bull rush. So I mean, that's a positive. And plus,
That's a
that's your
positive.
blindside guy. We didn't see Fields get hit from behind and fumble or any of that kind of stuff. Um, I thought Lucas Patrick played the worst out of all of them. I saw
Man.
him literally get pushed back by there was a screen to the left. I can't remember who it was to. There were so many screens where Kenny Clark walked him back 4 yards, almost hit Fields on a quick screen. I was like, okay. And then I saw, I think Wyatt just go right by him another time. I think Fields avoided that sack. But Luca, I already had this bad vision of Lucas Patrick in
This
my mind
right.
already, right? I think you knew this. I was actually okay with them cutting him and saving that $3.9 million. But anyways, that I think we'll see in the all 22. I think he played so poorly up front. It makes you wonder, do you make the change? You have Feeney, that's why you traded for him, or you put Whitehair back there, which apparently has no limitations, and you bring in Carter or put Feeney at guard.
I mean, that's one of those games. Look, I sit here talking. I actually expected to be angrier, Nick. Like, to anybody listening, I mean, obviously that was a mollywhopping of a Bears game, and if we'd started the post game pod like we should have halfway through the third quarter, you probably would have gotten more emotion. But it is one football game, and the best part about football is that the points don't roll over. The Bears don't start against Tampa Bay down 18; they start 0-0, and anything that the Bears do well in that game should carry forward. Now, obviously, if the Bears defense can't get any pressure on Baker Mayfield and Baker Mayfield picks the Bears apart and the Bears offense can't move the ball against yet another defensive line that's got some nasty matchups. Vita Vea against Lucas Patrick is
Yep.
not something I'm excited about, Nick. But at the same time, getting back to this Bears game, so much didn't work that you would imagine it's going to prompt change. But at the same time, Nick, I think that there's a point in culture that I always get worried about when it comes to a football locker room where Kansas City being down 21 doesn't bother them. They have been down 21 before. With San Francisco, a quarterback injury, that doesn't bother them. They have been down a quarterback and needed to raise up a new guy before. The Bears just lost 14 games. And we could say what we will about how many of the new Bears are not that team and not on that team. But this is always, Nick, where I get worried about how the locker room is going to handle instantaneous adversity. Because, hey, 16 teams lose. They're in the same boat as plenty of other teams. And there was some sloppy offensive football. Did you watch the Titans game? Like, the Titans and the Saints had a real slobber knocker of a
Yeah.
game
Well,
that
Tannehill threw 3 picks. That's what I saw.
right. And they weren't good. They weren't
No,
good at all.
it
But
was still a close game.
the scrutiny that I know this Bears team is under doesn't help anything. And it maybe that scrutiny is a little bit artificial just because of when they play Green Bay, there's more eyes on the team, and it doesn't help that they were at home. But I don't know. I end up really disappointed that this game wasn't even close
Yeah.
because that feels like every Packers game I've watched for the last 15 years of my life.
Yeah. I no, I completely agree with you. I mean, I live in Wisconsin. I'm a Bears fan, so I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm getting texts
Yep.
and messages and you know, yeah. Um, but here's one comfort that I have. I don't know if you get this, Robert. Just being a coach, I I take losses from teams I cheer for way lighter than I do teams that I've coached because like I actually have an influence on the outcome of the game versus I don't. So that's one thing that's like truly different, like I'm like, well, there's nothing I really can do. So it is what
Oh,
it is. But
sure. I,
um I have this, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I shouldn't be this way, but I feel differently about Fields even during that game. I felt differently than I have about him, at least the beginning of the year last year, or other Bears quarterbacks. When he drops back, like I don't have fear. Like I don't think he's going to make tons of mistakes or bad mistakes. I mean, he threw the pick. He's generally thrown picks. I feel like when he's down like two scores and he's thinking too much or something like that, or for the perfect play. But I mean, that's one pass out of a bunch today when they were just teeing off on you. I feel a little bit of comfort with him because he is making, chicken what out of chicken what. You know what I mean? Like
right.
I mean, he's doing well. I feel like given the I mean, think of anyone, Trevor Simeon, Andy Dalton behind all the pressure that you had. Because
Oh,
they
yeah.
even said at one point, they were like, man, Green Bay has pressure on 19 of these. And it wasn't because Fields was just sitting there holding the ball forever. It's just like, that's bad. I mean, one of the sacks he held for a while, and it was the guy came around. I don't even think it was a loop. I think Braxton Jones pushed his guy inside, and Wyatt came off of Whitehair. I'm not even gonna put that on Whitehair. It was like 4 seconds into the play, but I feel a little bit of comfort, and I don't know what's going to happen next year or how this year's going to go, but I don't think that Fields is disastrous. I feel like the
No.
line and maybe, as you said, play calling could be better.
Well, to me, that, Nick, encapsulates why I think this is the nightmare scenario. Because if I was going to rank offensive players, DJ Moore, in all of his 2 touches, looked really good. And chances are the second best player that I'm going to list is either Darnell Mooney or Justin Fields. Because, especially early in the game, it felt like Justin Fields was asked to bail the Bears out of a lot of bad situations. And he, worst case scenario, did make things worse. Best case scenario, like that Spinneroonie 3rd and 13 or whatever it was, converted something out of nearly thin air and helped the Bears go get points. The problem is, Nick, so the Bears just passed on number 1. Like, they just traded down, got a haul, thank goodness they did, added DJ Moore to their roster. In so
Mhm.
doing, Poles did not hitch his wagon to Fields because the roster was in such disrepair, but if the Bears end up with a high pick and have a shot at, probably not going to get a shot at Caleb Williams. We would hope not. But at the same time, Nick, I mean, Arizona was competitive to the last drive that they had. With the last drive of the game, if memory serves, they were only down 4. They
Yep,
were
it was
winning.
4.
They were
Mhm.
winning for large portions of
Yep,
today's game against the Commanders.
yep.
The Rams, who I think so many people thought had stripped their roster so bare that they would almost assuredly lose, won. Like, somebody is going to be really bad. That person or that team is going to end up number 1. And I just, today, performances like today make me feel like the saddest part about the state of the current Bears organization is that they have managed to architect a situation where even when Fields does better than I legitimately expected him to do, given that situation, I don't know that it's going to win over George McCaskey and other check signers and other people who could instead get a new quarterback and with it get an extension. Because if they're in striking distance of Drake May and they don't even have to give anything up to get him, I don't have faith right now that the Bears organization wouldn't make Fields a scapegoat. But it's one game. We're
Yeah.
not at number 2 overall in the draft right now. Like
No.
it's just a huge bummer to see the Packers basically come out of the second half, decide, oh shoot, what if we just threw to Aaron Jones more? And oh my gosh, did it work?
It was the second one was worse than the first one. The first one, I'm like, yep, you got a good screen in there, you know. The second one was TJ Edwards is a good coverage linebacker. He made a bad play, and it was fourth down. Like, that's literally 7 points that wouldn't happen if it
Yep.
was incomplete at all. You got pressure, you didn't call cover one. Like, I don't even know what's going on. Um, but even like right there, I it just feels like Chicago's cursed against Green Bay. That's just what it feels like. It
It
feels
does.
like the Cubs. It feels like, Boston, whatever. They had a man beating play call on fourth down, and Chicago called man. It's like, yep. And then they predicted right on two of the boots when it happened and sacked Fields, which how many boots did Fields even get sacked on last year? Like, not many, you know?
Not that
Okay.
many, especially
Yeah.
late in the season. He was able to
Right.
get the ball out to somebody.
Right.
But
So it just feels like they guessed right a bunch, and then you combine that with, a pick six, which honestly I thought he was like going to get tackled, and then people got lazy, and like it would again the snowball effect. But I'm not going to go there. It's a long season. We've talked endlessly about a lot of stuff with Chicago over the offseason. They are better. They won 3 games last year. They're going to win more than 3 games this year. They have an easy schedule, as we talked about. Robert, we talked about the rest
I know,
advantage. Okay.
I
Like
know.
all these things. And here's another thing, too. We saw some good play today from Roshan Johnson. Looked pretty good out there. He
Roshan
looked like
Johnson looked
he
great.
wanted it. Yep.
He entered the game when the game was nearly decided. And so again, it always gets strange to me. It gets strange then evaluating how well did that player play against a defense where he's much fresher than them. But all the same, he was a really fun spark plug. Came in with a number much better than 30. Like me personally, I think 23 is a much better number, especially in Chicago than 30 is for a running back. That's fullback's number. Not the point.
He-
But
I,
yeah,
I have something different for you. Okay.
gimme.
Maybe something that I'm just curious what your thought is on this. So Fields had that scramble early. I saw actually no, there's a play earlier. I saw Moore and Claypool open. And we'll see if there's people open on the scramble. Scrambles, get some yards, gets hit by J.R. Alexander legally. I did not think it was legal. Didn't think it was a cheap shot. If you can hit the quarterback, hit him, right?
Right.
And then we saw Lucas Patrick come over, and we saw all the other Bears come over, and they were protecting their guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you think that those guys come over there if they don't believe in Justin Fields, if they don't think that he is their leader, if they don't think that he is a good player?
Well, that's the thing. Like, of course, I think that they think that he's their leader. Just like how I didn't. It's not like I saw. You remember that Cowboys clip from years back when Andy Dalton got hurt, and the Cowboys offensive line didn't even help him up. You know what I'm talking about? That's not something that happened to Trubisky either. It's not like we've got this standard of comparison where we can look at quarterbacks that didn't work out and say, well, dang, their teams just hated him. Unless that's what you feel. And in this case, we're not there yet with Fields. We're not even close. Again, I thought he played well today until the wheels fell off and the whole offense basically went into the gutter. But somebody has to wear the blame for a bad offensive performance. And it could be Getsy. It could be the offensive line. It could be maybe you think your wide receivers didn't get open enough on some of the downfield passing things. Maybe Fields didn't see them. I don't know. There's so many answers that we don't have because we don't have the all-22. But what I know nearly anybody's going to point to, Nick, is points. And the Bears did not score many of them while the game was still competitive. And the pick six super sucks because that should nearly never be a pick six. Like the amount of offensive players that miss tackles, whatever. That's not their job. So you just kind of rear your head back and laugh about it. And like you're saying, it becomes yet another feather in the cap of, well, so we're never going to beat the Packers again in my lifetime, but at least we know that now. And I could just stop pretending like they will. It's a joke, by the way, but man, do games like that feel like that, right? But I don't know, Nick, because I'm there. I am there. But we talked on the pregame pod about how the Packers match up to the Bears very similarly than Tampa Bay does. So,
Mhm.
what do the Bears do differently? What improvement do we anticipate going forward? Or whenever the Bears match up against a defensive line? Because the real thing that bothered me about this was there are ways with run action, play action, with you can use run action, play action to form normal pocket drops. They don't have to be boots necessarily. You can use 3-step, 1-step gun passing. Like, you can pivot to the pistol. You can run fields on designed carries where Herbert is your lead blocker. There are so many ways to not make your offensive line the primary, like, differentiator and the main focus of your offense. But that's not what the Bears did. And I think that has me really worried because instead of saying, "Oh shoot, that's a matchup we don't like. We're not going to deal with that." It felt like they let the Packers defensive line dominate them. Like the offensive game plan allowed the Packers defensive line to be the feature player. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh no, 100%. And so to get Chicago's offensive line to not be the focal point of this offense, you would have to, and I'm actually doing a little bit of math right now. You would have to run the football. That was the answer because last year when we talked about this, Chicago ran the ball, I think was 6.7 yards per carry with Fields as well in both contests against Green Bay. But I have some gross numbers for you here, Robert.
Oh
Okay.
no.
So Fields, again, let's just put this out there. Fields had 275 yards of offense and only 59 of it was rushing. Okay, everyone. Can he throw the football? Yes, he threw the football. It was fine. A lot were checkdowns, which I understand, but you're going to do that when you're getting sacked. He completed the ball. He knew where the checkdowns were. He went through progressions. Like I
Yes.
literally saw it from even the one
Yes.
view. Like that stuff happened. So the sky isn't falling. But this is the one thing I think where, we talked about the big plays that Green Bay had and the pick six, even the fumble that Fields had. The defense held and they gave up no points. Now, again, Green Bay had a personal foul penalty on that one, but that was impressive. This is, I think, where Chicago lost the game. Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson, and Deontay Foreman. They combined for 19 carries. Do you just want to guess, Robert, how many yards they had?
Oh
19
man, I was
carries
actually looking. Isn't
in
it
those
like
three.
it's an abysmal yards per attempt, right? Like
Well,
it did
I
something
can do
in
that,
the
but how many total yards in 19 carries do you think they had?
19 carries. I think they probably had 40 yards.
63,
Okay. Okay.
which averages
Too low.
3.32 yards per carry, which is half of what they had the last 2 years against Green Bay.
Well, and a
So
lot
that
of them
right
came
there.
late, which
Well,
doesn't.
some yeah, yes, I agree. Some of them came late, and you could add in, I know Komet had we didn't add this in there, but Komet had the sneak that didn't count. Fields had this sneak that didn't get anything. So Fields really had 8 carries for 59 yards, which is super efficient, like he always is when he runs the football. But that right there, I think, is a big issue. And you're talking about what can change for next week. And that leads me to a couple of things. I had already talked about how I was unimpressed with how Khalil Herbert bounced outside of
Mhm.
a couple of schemes or thinking he could do something that he couldn't do. He had 9 carries for 27 yards. That is
Bad.
horrible for his own standards because he's actually a really efficient runner. Foreman had 5 for 16, which is a little bit better efficiency wise. And then Roshan Johnson had 5 for 20, and then he had the touchdown late, which hurt his average actually. But he had, again, late 6 receptions for 35 yards, and he's the best pass protector. I know we thought this was going to happen middle of the season or late in the season, but is having Roshan Johnson your lead back who can pass protect Justin Fields and help this bad line even until Tevin Jenkins comes back. So think about that. When Jenkins comes back, that helps you.
Oh
That
yeah.
does. Period. I know if he's not a better pass protector, he's a better run blocker, but it helps you. He was the third best guard for PFF last year. You bring him back, then you put Whitehair at center, and now it's the line that you envisioned. But do you put Roshan there now, even if you don't think he's the best runner, but because he's going to protect Fields more? What do you think?
I think maybe if Roshan can handle the load, like if it sounds as if the Bears seems as if the Bears want to do a lot of throwing to the running back, which is fine. I mean, you've seen it like I have. You can do check and release stuff where you check if there's a blitzer and then the running back gets out. Maybe they think that Khalil Herbert was going to do more to help with pass protection than meets the eye. I know one other thing, Nick, that doesn't help anything is so let's say Roshan Johnson is back there trying to stop whoever's coming. Roshan will help with interior pressure, so that'll help the Nate Davis when Nate Davis allowed pressure from Devontae Wyatt. But if Rashawn Gary beats somebody around the edge and Roshan doesn't immediately see it, he's still going to beat Darnell right around the edge because I've not seen a lot of running backs bend that far backwards to go make a play. If anything, they may see it and then try to dive out that side to become an immediate check down, as if there's an element of, hey, Justin, you got a shark right near you. Like, I need the ball.
Unless he's going to chip, like if he's going out into a flat, like let's say the right flat, he could chip the
Right.
end and then release. The other
You got
idea,
to think Herbert would be able to chip, though, right? I mean,
well,
chipping doesn't take blocking skill, just takes throwing your shoulder at the guy.
yeah, he looked bad in the preseason. Remember, he missed that block on that linebacker.
Yeah,
He did catch.
man.
Let's give him. He did
He
catch
did.
3 passes for 37 yards. He had 5 targets. So he did okay there. But it just makes you wonder a little bit. And I'm okay if Chicago leans way more into running the football. You could vary up what runs they are, even, whether it's a duo or inside zone or outside zone or a counter. Like there's lots of stuff that you can do. And even, Fields is a threat. Like
Right.
have him hand off and then boot out. Like that's you need to weigh that a little bit more. But I think that takes a lot of pressure off lots of lines because when it's going to be 2nd and 5, 2nd and 3, it opens up everything and makes the defensive line not think, hey, it's going to be, I can pass rush. I don't care if it's either I'm either going to get after Fields or it's going to be a halfback screen. Like
Right.
you're going to create a little more deception.
Which the Bears need. They need it desperately too. And
Mhm.
at some point, they'll have to crack open the pass game. At some point, they will have to be able to throw the ball on first, second down. I mean, it feels as if right now the Bears' offense is so tied to the run. I don't think there was anything that was quite as look. I'm not going to call it insulting, Nick. We don't need to go that far. But even the Bears' touchdown drive late in the game opened with the Bears running the ball in the mid third quarter, normally acceptable. But when you're down 18 points, I think it
Mhm.
was, it you want a little more urgency. And they opened up, if memory serves, with not one but two runs in that drive where
Mhm.
they were going to get back to hashtag establishing that ground game. And we talked in the pregame pod about how that's what we thought the Bears would do, but not there. Like at that point, you just need to air the ball out. DJ Moore ends up with, did he have more? Did he have 3 targets, 2 catches, 25
Uh,
yards?
he had 2 targets, 2 catches, 25 yards.
Man, Nick. Like,
Claypool only had 2 targets. One was that tipped screen, but he
right.
dropped it. He still could have got it. I mean, I'm not going to fault him when it gets tipped
No,
like that, but he only had 2 targets. Mooney had 7.
there just weren't that many targets to go around either. Like, at
Well,
least
not when you have to get
downfield.
the ball so quick.
Right. And again, I mean, I don't know how things are going to get better against Tampa Bay, but they can't get much worse than they did in this one. At least from a shutdown perspective, the Bears' offense was pretty well shuttered until Green
Mhm.
Bay, it felt to me like went to nickel, called a shell defense, and just
Yep.
sort of let the Bears do whatever they wanted to do.
Well,
And yeah,
the one thing that surprised me was because of Fields, and again, this is what makes me think maybe something was different this year. We didn't see him take a ton of deep shots in training camp,
right.
even joint practices, preseason, because he normally likes to take shots down the field. That's what he likes, the deep ball. He has a long 8 out, we call it, so average depth of target. He didn't take any shots down the field today, did he?
No. In fact, I'm actually looking right now at his average depth of target chart. Would you like to take a guess on Fields' 37 attempts? How many of these targets are beyond 10 yards down the field?
Mm,
37 attempts.
5.
4. So you get the pick, you have an incompletion at about the 17-yard mark, and then the flick throw to the 20-yard touchdown, and then the flick throw that he had rolling out.
To Mooney.
So
Yep.
there you go. That's the whole game beyond 10 yards.
Yep.
Where was that? We won't know until we see the all 22. But as far as wrapping things up just a little bit, because there's a Sunday night game on, and I really don't care. Right now, looking at the score, looks like Dallas is obliterating the Giants, and I just need palate cleansing football, to be honest with you. Like, it can be nothing football by the time we get to it. I just need something. To me, after all the talk and all the lead up, it bums me out that the Bears are as shocked as we are. And the good news is this will put the coaching staff to the test. I mean, this is a great way to evaluate whether Matt Eberflus, Alan Williams, and Luke Getsy are the kinds of guys that can take this adversity and adjust, right? Because like you're saying, Nick, sometimes you get outcoached. It's an inevitability that everybody gets outcoached eventually. Case in point, Matt Eberflus outcoached Bill Belichick not just last year. But like, you got to see how a coach adjusts, and the Bears will get the very quick opportunity to know whether their
Yep.
coaches can adjust. And
Mhm.
I guess, not that we want to be tired talking about this anytime soon, Nick, if things don't go well, if the Bears coaches can't adjust, maybe you have to make a decision at the end of the year. But
Yeah, it could
I'm
happen.
I'm also trying to walk the line between rage at the situation, knowing how much mess Bears fans talked on Twitter towards Green Bay, and knowing how that loud sect of Twitter is going to, how that's going to basically tilt conversation about the Bears. Like, it's going to be a Bears still suck for quite some time until they at least
They'll
even
say
their
that
record
either
out.
way, so whatever.
Yes, but man, it would have been so nice to not be 0-9 in our last 9 games, among
Yep.
other things. But what can you do? But even still, there's a game next week. What would you
Mhm.
say are your final thoughts about this contest?
I got one other thing that we didn't touch on, and I'll make it brief, but I was disappointed in special teams. Um, Santos was a good note. He had 2 touchbacks and he
Yep,
made everything. Obviously, Taylor was fine because he caught everything and got the yardage back on returns. Other than that, though, Roshan Johnson had a personal foul on a special teams play. I mean, come on, man. And then they allowed some big returns to Green Bay that changed things. I mean, there was a 30-some yard return by Reed. He had, man, what did he have in this? I should like look it up, but he had multiple returns for double-digit yards, which again, as we know, the closer you are to the end zone, the higher the percentages of you actually scoring a touchdown. I mean, the starting field position game, Green Bay won that as well. So they
huge.
won on these big plays that Chicago did not have, as we just talked about, and they won on where the field's going to be, and they won in terms of penalties. Later, they had a bunch of dumb ones, but like early on, they won in that. So those are big factors. I mean, you add turnovers and sacks into that. And then the last thing is third down. They crushed Chicago in third down. Chicago was 3 of 13 on third down, and Green Bay was 9 of 16.
I
Those are
always
things. Go ahead.
I always wish that got cited with depth of target on third down too, because
Mhm.
the Bears encountered so many 3rd and 10 pluses,
Yep.
including a 3rd and 20, that there are some of these third downs where, yeah, I wouldn't have expected them to get them. But at the same time, Green Bay converted so many of their third downs that
Mhm.
when you're living above 50% on third, you're going to keep a lot of drives going.
Mhm.
It was infuriating. It felt like the team that shouldn't found a way to, and the team that could have found a way to not. You know
Yep.
what I'm saying?
That's how it felt, and that's. I mean, I know that we all carry some type of bias within this, but Chicago definitely did not play up to, I think, even the potential that everyone had, not just Bears Twitter or Bears people. And I think Green Bay played better than people thought. And so, over 17 games, that stuff's going to even out. The other thing I just want to touch on was I only saw one injury. Kyler Gordon, right, hurt his hand. Is that correct?
Yes,
Did
hand
he come
injury.
back or
I
no?
didn't I didn't see it, but
Okay.
maybe he did. I mean, that was where I definitely would tell you that I was working on the computer a little bit more than I was like watching
Yeah.
the game to see if he got back in.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean that would be unfortunate to lose him because he had arguably the best camp of any player, Bears
And he had a
player.
really good game. Like,
Mm,
started with the sweet pass breakup. Like, there are players on this roster well worth being excited about. This isn't
yeah.
last year per se, and even last year was part of a process. Like, Nick, the good news is that you look across the NFL landscape and the Bears' talent is getting there, and what they could end up again in the worst case scenario is a treasure trove of draft picks that'll help him get even more talent. I mean,
Mhm.
Kyler Gordon coming along, Jaquan Brisker, if he becomes whatever he wants to. I thought Pickens and Dexter were clearly decent enough that I didn't notice them every single time they ended the game, despite the fact that the Bears' defensive line was so. And I want to take a stronger look at what they're doing. They're rookies, anyways. I don't know, man. Like I,
What do you think? What do you think Green Bay average per rush?
uh, it's is it actually that much? Honest question. Like, what is it?
2.9.
I was gonna say, like, the Bears set out to stop the run game. They forced a lot of long third downs. It was, ironically, those third down situations that just completely undid them. I mean, we could have made jokes early on in the season where it's like you're gonna. I even think I may have said early on in our podcasting, like the Bears are going to try to get stops by forcing so many third downs that you can't possibly convert them all. And unfortunately, Green Bay converted a few too many in this
Yep.
game. But oh man. It's what a game, right?
I'm gonna end with how I started. Okay. Cincinnati, Minnesota, Denver, Seattle, Kansas City fans feel the same way. And Eagles fans, I even saw they were like, whew, we beat New England. It's 1 week. I saw progress from guys. I saw guys didn't play up to their potential. And to me, that gives you hope. They're better than they were last year. We knew this wasn't going to be, I mean, I think we predicted what, 8 or 9 wins.
Right.
Maybe it's 7, 8 now, whatever. Like they're in that range. You're gonna lose some games that you should win. You're gonna win some games you probably shouldn't. It's all gonna balance out over the end, but um it just sucks. And we'll see how they do next week. And honestly, you're gonna learn a lot about a team with how they bounce back. Because this is a team where you got more guys that are athletes and how is Falus and company going to coach them up? How are the veterans going to, okay, now we have to put more work in and we need to make adjustments? I mean, because again, like you said, if it's 0-3, that says a lot more, I think, about the coaches than it does anything else because you're supposed to get them to bounce back.
Yep. That's the job. And I mean, if Bowles and that Tampa offense, or not even the offense per se, if Bowles and that Tampa team come back and defend their home turf, whereas the Bears don't bounce back enough, you got a problem. Like you
Mhm,
sprung a leak. I mean, let's put it this way, Nick, because I think I get what you're saying. Where I look at this and it's like, well, from an individual data point perspective, this is a very bad data point. The good news is we can wrap it up in a little bag and leave it there. But a trend is when you get two data points pointing in the wrong direction. And I hear what you're
mhm,
saying. If the Bears end up 1-1, I mean, process matters a little more than results in my opinion, but if the Bears do find their way to 1-1, they bounce back, then we could look at this and say, well, we're always cursed against Green Bay, right? Especially if
mhm.
Chris Jones misses that Kansas City game, or if Travis Kelce doesn't play in that game either. Apparently anything's possible, because I didn't think Detroit played a particularly phenomenal game, but
No,
in November and December they're still going to score that one as a win, which is
right.
exactly what they needed from it. So
Mhm,
there's a puncher's chance all the time until you take too many. And so
mhm.
we'll just have to see what happens.
We
But
will. We will.
either,
And
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry. A little hope for Bears fans. We'll talk about this on our pod midweek. Tampa Bay won. They averaged 3.6 yards per play,
it was so bad.
and they won. So it's like they didn't even play that great. So,
it was it would have been a great day. It would have been a great day for a win because you would have taken a huge step over the rest of the division. But we'll see. Either way,
mhm,
We are Nick Whalen and Robert Schmitz. We're right here on Twitter. Nick, what's your handle?
@_Nick Whalen.
Underscore Nick Whalen. So check him out and all the work that he's going to do. You can check my handle, Robert K. Schmitz, for film breakdowns, not just on this channel, but also across Twitter nearly all tomorrow. As soon as I'm able to get the film, we'll be going through it so that we can see exactly what did and didn't happen. But until then, Bears fans, enjoy the evening as much as you can. Enjoy the morning if you're listening to this in the morning. Obviously, this isn't the result that anybody wanted, but it's 1 week. So until then, bear down, and thanks so much for bearing with us.